Camping was always my escape. I never liked cities much, too crowded, too loud. I worked a job that kept me stuck indoors all week, staring at a computer screen. So whenever I got the chance, I packed up my gear and headed out into the woods. No phone, no distractions, just quiet. This trip was no different. It was early October, the perfect time for camping. Cool enough to keep the bugs away, warm enough to be comfortable. I picked a remote spot deep in the woods, miles from any marked trails. It was a place I had camped before, far enough from people that I could go a whole weekend without seeing another person. That's how I liked it. I parked my truck at the edge of an old logging road and hiked in about 5 miles. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. The only sounds were my boots crunching leaves and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. I set up camp by a small clearing near a stream, pitched my tent, and got a fire going as the sun started to set. The first night was uneventful. I cooked some food, listened to the sounds of the forest, and fell asleep to the distant hoot of an owl. It was exactly what I needed, but everything changed the next morning. I woke up just as the sun was coming up. The air was crisp, and everything had that quiet stillness you only get early in the morning. I unzipped my tent, stepped outside, and that's when I saw it. A dog. It was sitting at the edge of the clearing, maybe 30 feet away, just sitting there, staring at me. It was a big dog, black with patches of brown, maybe a German Shepherd mix. Its fur was dirty, matted in places, like it had been out here for a long time. But what unsettled me the most was its eyes. They weren't the eyes of a lost pet looking for help. They were empty, cold. I stood there for a while, waiting to see if it would move, but it didn't. It just sat there, staring. Something about it made my skin crawl. I turned away, trying to shake the unease, and started getting my fire going again. When I looked back a minute later, the dog was gone. I told myself it was nothing, probably a stray, maybe even a hunting dog that had gotten lost. It wasn't unusual to see dogs in the woods, but still something about it felt wrong. The day went on like normal. I hiked, fished a little in the stream, and relaxed. But the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every now and then, I thought I saw movement in the trees, just a quick flash of black fur before disappearing. By evening, I felt uneasy enough that I kept my knife close as I cooked dinner. I kept glancing at the edge of the trees, expecting to see the dog again, but I never did. That night, I barely slept. Every time I drifted off, I'd wake up to some small noise outside, twigs snapping, leaves rustling. I told myself it was just the wind or some small animal, but deep down, I knew. It was the dog. The next morning, I found tracks. They were just outside my tent, circling it. Big paw prints deep in the dirt. The dog had been there, watching. I decided then that I was leaving. I packed up fast, stuffing my gear into my bag as quickly as I could. I didn't feel safe anymore. As I started hiking back, I kept checking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the dog following me. For the first few miles, everything was quiet. But then, about halfway back to my truck, I heard it. Footsteps, not mine. I stopped. The sound stopped. I started walking again. A few seconds later, I heard it again. Something was following me. Picked up my pace, heart pounding. The sound of footsteps stayed just far enough behind that I couldn't see anything when I turned around, but I knew it was there. Then, up ahead, I saw movement. The dog, standing right in the middle of the trail, staring at me. I stopped. My grip tightened on the knife in my pocket. The dog didn't move. I took a step forward, took a step toward me. My mouth went dry. Every instinct was telling me to run, but I knew that was a bad idea. I forced myself to keep walking, slow and steady, keeping my eyes on it the whole time. Then, just as I got within 10 feet, it did something that made my stomach drop. It smiled. Not a snarl, not a growl, a smile. Its lips pulled back, showing yellow teeth, but there was no anger in it, just something else, something worse. I took another step. The dog stepped aside, letting me pass. But as I walked past, I could feel its eyes on me. I didn't look back. I kept walking, faster now, my breath coming in short gasps. I was close to my truck now, maybe a mile away. Then I heard it again. The footsteps, not just behind me, to my left, my right, more than one. I didn't stop to look. I ran. Branches whipped against my face. My pack bounced against my shoulders. I didn't care. I just ran. I could hear them moving with me, keeping pace. The sound of paws against dirt. At least 3, maybe 4. I saw my truck up ahead. I sprinted. The second I reached it, I threw my pack down, yanked the door open, and jumped inside. I slammed the door shut and locked it. Silence. I sat there, chest heaving, hands shaking. Then movement. From the trees, one by one, they stepped out. For dogs. All black, all with those same empty eyes. They just stood there watching, waiting. Then, as if someone had given them a signal, they turned and walked back into the woods. I sat there for a long time before finally starting the engine and driving away. I don't camp alone anymore, and I never go back to those woods. Camping always felt like a good escape. No phone buzzing, no work stress, just trees, fresh air, and the quiet. That's what I needed. That's what we all needed. It was me, my cousin Ryan, and our friend Nate. We had done this before plenty of times, but this trip felt different, though I didn't know why at first. We picked a spot deep in the woods, far from any marked trails. We liked being away from people. The more isolated, the better. The hike-in was tough, about 5 miles with heavy packs, but the deeper we went, the more peaceful it felt. No sounds of distant cars or other hikers, just the rustling of trees and the occasional crack of a branch underfoot. The first day was normal. We set up camp, gathered firewood, and sat around the fire, drinking and talking. The woods were quiet, the way they always were at night, but something about them felt off. I chalked it up to being tired from the hike. The second day, we decided to explore. We had no plans, no maps, just walking wherever we felt like going. We had done this before, always making sure we kept track of landmarks so we wouldn't get lost. It was around noon when we found something strange. It was an old, rusted-out pickup truck, just sitting there, deep in the woods where no truck had any business being. The windows were shattered, the doors hanging open. Nature had started taking it back. Moss growing along the sides, weeds pushing through the floorboards. It must have been there for years. Ryan walked up first, peeking inside. "Looks like someone's old hunting truck," he muttered. I looked around. There were no signs of a road or trail leading here. No footprints, no tire tracks. The forest was thick in every direction. We checked the truck but found nothing. Just old beer cans, an empty rifle rack, and a rotting seat cushion. Still, it unsettled me. Something about it just felt wrong. The rest of the day was normal. We hiked back to camp, ate, and sat around the fire again. But that night, I woke up to something strange, a sound. At first, I thought it was the wind, but it was steady, rhythmic. Footsteps. I held my breath, listening. They were close, maybe 30 feet from the tent. Not fast, not slow, just walking. I reached for my knife, not making a sound. The footsteps stopped. I waited. Nothing. After a while, I convinced myself it was an animal, maybe a deer. I forced myself to relax and eventually fell back asleep. The next morning, I didn't mention it. No point in freaking anyone out over something small. We spent the day fishing and exploring more, but that feeling of unease never left me. That night, I heard it again. The footsteps. This time, they came closer. Slow, careful. I didn't move. I just listened. Then they stopped right outside the tent. I held my breath. My mind was racing. Was it a person? An animal? Then something brushed against the tent fabric. Just a light touch, but it sent a bolt of fear through me. I gripped my knife, waiting. Then silence. No retreating footsteps, no rustling. Nothing. I didn't sleep after that. I just lay there waiting for morning. At dawn, I got out and looked around. No tracks, no broken branches, no signs that anything had been there. I told Ryan and Nate. They shrugged it off. Probably an animal, they said. Maybe I imagined it. I knew I didn't imagine it. That day, we hiked further out. We wanted to see if we could find anything interesting, old cabins, abandoned trails, anything. But deep in the woods, we found something else. A tent. It wasn't new, but it wasn't ancient either. Just sitting there, half collapsed like someone left it in a hurry. We called out, but no one answered. Nate unzipped it and looked inside. Empty, except for a sleeping bag and some old clothes. A flashlight lay on the ground, dead batteries still inside. Something felt wrong. We searched the area but found nothing. No people, no signs of life. Just that abandoned tent. We left quickly. That night, I barely slept. Around 3 a.m., I heard something again. But this time, it wasn't just footsteps. It was breathing, right outside the tent. Deep, slow. I gripped my knife, heart pounding. Then, a sound. Something pressing against the tent, slow and deliberate, like a hand dragging across the fabric. I couldn't move. Then, just like before, silence. I stayed awake until sunrise. We all felt off that morning. No one said much, but I could tell they felt it too. We packed up fast. None of us said it, but we all had the same thought. We needed to leave. The hike back felt longer. The woods were quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no wind. Just the sound of our footsteps. Then, about a mile from the car, we saw something. Footprints. Not ours. Fresh. And they weren't going in our direction. They were following us. No one spoke. We just kept walking, faster now. When we reached the car, we threw our gear in and took off. None of us looked back. We never went back to that spot. A few months later, I searched online, trying to find anything about that area. I found an old news article. 10 years ago, a man went missing there. A hunter. They never found his body. Just his truck, deep in the woods. The same truck we found. And the footprints, they weren't ours. I've always loved the outdoors. There's something about being out in the middle of nowhere that makes me feel alive. No noise from the city, no distractions. Just the trees, the wind, and the sound of my own footsteps. That's why I go on solo camping trips at least once a year. It's my way of resetting. No phone, no work, just me and nature. I've been doing it since my early 20s, and by now I know what I'm doing. This trip was supposed to be like all the others. I had picked a remote spot deep in the forest, about 7 miles from where I parked my truck. It was off-trail, away from the usual camping areas. That's how I liked it. The fewer people around, the better. The hike-in was tough, but that's what I wanted, a challenge. The air was crisp. The leaves had started changing colors, and everything smelled like earth and pine. I felt good. I reached my campsite by late afternoon, set up my tent, and gathered firewood. I cooked a simple meal over the fire, ate, and sat back to enjoy the silence. Everything was perfect. But then I found something. I was walking about 50 yards from my camp, looking for more firewood, when I saw it. A backpack. It was just sitting there, half buried in leaves, like someone had dropped it and never came back for it. At first, I thought maybe a hunter had left it behind. But when I picked it up, I knew something wasn't right. It was old, weathered. The fabric was torn in places, and the zippers were rusted. It had been out here for a long time. I set it down and unzipped it. Inside, there were a few things: a water bottle, a flashlight with dead batteries, a couple of granola bars so old they had turned to dust, and a notebook. I flipped through the pages. Most of them were filled with scribbled notes, times and dates. Some of it was just random thoughts, like someone keeping a journal. Then I reached the last page. If someone finds this, I'm sorry. I tried to find my way back, but I keep ending up in the same place. I think something is following me. If you find this, please tell my family. There was a name at the bottom. David Halloway. I stared at it for a long time. I had heard that name before. A few years back, there had been a story in the news about a missing hiker. A guy who had gone into the woods and never came back. They searched for weeks but never found him. This was his backpack. My stomach dropped. I looked around. The forest felt different now, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I took the notebook and left the rest. I didn't want to be near that backpack any longer than I had to. Back at camp, I sat by the fire, reading through the journal again. Most of it didn't make sense, just notes about trails and landmarks. But one thing stuck out. He wrote about feeling watched, about hearing something at night, about finding footprints that weren't his. I told myself it was nothing, just the ramblings of a lost hiker who probably got turned around and panicked. But then that night, I heard something. It started with the sound of footsteps. At first, I thought it was an animal, but animals don't move like that. They don't walk with careful, deliberate steps. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps circled my tent, slow and steady, not rushing, not sneaking, just moving. Then they stopped, right outside my tent. I gripped my knife, waiting. Minutes passed. Then, just as suddenly as they started, the footsteps moved away. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, listening to the sounds of the forest, waiting for the footsteps to come back. By morning, I had made up my mind. I was leaving. I packed up fast, barely stopping to eat. I didn't care about taking my time. I just wanted to get back to my truck. The hike back was different. Every now and then, I would stop and listen. I kept thinking I heard something behind me, the crunch of leaves, the snap of a twig. But every time I turned around, there was nothing. I walked faster. Then, about halfway back, I found something. Footprints. Not mine. They were fresh, deep, and they were following mine. My hands started shaking. I looked around, scanning the trees, but I saw nothing. Just the same endless stretch of forest. I kept moving. The last mile was the worst. The feeling of being watched never left me. Every rustle of leaves made my heart jump. Then, finally, I saw my truck. I ran the last 100 yards, yanked the door open, and threw my pack inside. I turned the key and the engine roared to life. I looked back at the trail one last time, and that's when I saw it. A figure, standing just at the edge of the trees. Too far to make out details, but close enough that I knew it wasn't my imagination. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching. I slammed the truck into gear and sped down the road, not stopping until I was miles away. I never went back, and I never go camping alone anymore. Camping alone has always been something I enjoy. Most people don't get it. They think it's dangerous, that being out in the middle of nowhere with no one to help you is a bad idea. Maybe they're right, but I love the quiet. I love being away from people, from the constant noise of life. Out there, in the woods, everything slows down. There's no phone buzzing, no emails, no traffic. Just trees, wind, and time. This trip was supposed to be like the others. I had picked a spot deep in the national forest, about 10 miles from the nearest dirt road. It wasn't on any marked trail. I had spent weeks studying maps, looking for the perfect place. Somewhere untouched, somewhere isolated. The hike in was tough. It was late fall, so the air was cool, but the ground was soft from recent rain, making the climb up the hills slower than I expected. I didn't mind, though. The deeper I went, the more peaceful it felt. By late afternoon, I reached a clearing near a small stream. It was perfect. Flat ground, plenty of space, and a natural water source. I set up my tent, gathered firewood, and got a small fire going as the sun started to set. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. She was standing at the edge of the trees, maybe 50 yards away, not moving, just standing there. She was barefoot, wearing a long, pale dress that looked worn, almost gray with dirt. Her hair was long and tangled, falling past her shoulders. She was facing me, but I couldn't make out her face in the dim light. My first thought was that she was lost, maybe a hiker who had wandered too far. But something about the way she stood, so still, so unnatural, made my skin crawl. I blinked, and she was gone. I scanned the tree line, but there was nothing, just the wind shifting the branches. I tried to shake it off. I was tired from the hike, and the light was fading. Shadows played tricks on the mind. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing things. Small noises just outside my tent. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling. Once I thought I heard footsteps, but every time I unzipped the tent and looked, there was nothing there. By morning, I almost convinced myself it was just my imagination. Almost. I spent most of the day exploring the area, following the stream, taking in the quiet. I found an old deer trail and decided to see where it led. I hiked for about an hour before I saw something strange. A cabin. It was old, falling apart. Half the roof had caved in, and the door was hanging open. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades, but there were signs that someone had been there recently. A pile of firewood stacked neatly by the entrance, footprints in the dirt, and something else. Hanging from a tree beside the cabin was a piece of cloth, a torn strip of fabric swaying gently in the breeze, a strip of pale, worn fabric, just like the dress the woman had been wearing. I felt something deep in my gut, a warning. I turned and walked back to my camp, fast. That night, the noises came back. The footsteps were louder now, closer. At one point, I heard breathing, slow, steady breathing, right outside my tent. I gripped my knife and held my breath, waiting. Then, nothing. Silence. I didn't sleep. By morning, I had decided. I was leaving. I packed up fast, stuffing everything into my bag without care. I didn't eat. I didn't even put out the fire properly. I just needed to go. The hike back felt different. The forest felt wrong. Too quiet. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see her. And then I did. She was standing in the trees, far back but close enough that I could see her face this time. Her eyes were wide, too wide, unblinking. Her lips were cracked and dry, pulled back into something that wasn't quite a smile. She was watching me. I didn't stop. I didn't run. I just kept walking, forcing myself not to look again. But I felt her, every mile, every step. She was there, somewhere, watching. By the time I reached my truck, the sun was already low in the sky. I threw my bag into the back seat and slammed the door shut. I sat there for a moment, trying to catch my breath. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw her, standing at the edge of the trees, closer now, still watching. I turned the key, the engine roared to life, and I sped down the road, not looking back. I don't camp alone anymore, and I never go back to those woods. I have always loved camping alone. Most people don't get it. They ask why I would go out into the middle of nowhere with no company, no cell service, and nothing but a tent and some gear. They think it's dangerous. Maybe they're right. But for me, camping is about escaping. No distractions, no noise, just the quiet of the forest and the rhythm of the natural world. I feel more at home out there than I do in my apartment, surrounded by walls and artificial lights. This trip was supposed to be like all the others. I had picked a remote spot, deep in a national forest, far from any marked trails. I had studied the maps, planned my route, and packed enough supplies for 4 days. It was late September, cool enough to keep the bugs away but not cold enough to make the nights miserable. Perfect. The hike in was peaceful. I followed an old game trail, moving deeper into the woods than most people ever go. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No distant hum of traffic, no voices, just the sound of my boots crunching leaves and the occasional rustling of small animals in the underbrush. After about 7 miles, I found a clearing near a small stream. It was perfect. Flat ground, easy access to water, and enough trees around to break the wind. I set up my tent, gathered some firewood, and got a fire going as the sun started to set. That's when I first saw him. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. He was standing at the edge of the tree line, maybe 50 yards away, just standing there. A man, tall, thin, dressed in clothes that looked too big for him. His posture was strange. His shoulders hunched forward slightly, his head tilted, like he was studying me. I froze. Something about him was off. The way he stood, the way he didn't move, the way his body seemed wrong. I blinked, and he was gone. I scanned the trees, but there was nothing, just the shadows shifting in the wind. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination, or maybe some hunter passing through. But my gut told me otherwise. I sat by the fire, listening. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves made my skin crawl. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing things. Footsteps. Not constant, just one or two steps at a time, coming from different directions. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone was circling my camp. I held my knife in my hand, waiting, but nothing happened. By morning, I almost convinced myself it was just my nerves. Almost. I spent the day exploring the area, trying to enjoy the solitude. I followed the stream for a while, watched the sunlight filter through the trees, listened to the wind. But the feeling never left me. The feeling of being watched. That evening, I made my fire bigger. Something about the night felt different, heavier. I sat with my back to a tree, facing the fire, scanning the darkness. Then movement. My heart pounded. The man was back, closer this time. I could see his face now. His features were strange. Too sharp, his skin pale and stretched too tight over his bones. His eyes were too wide, unblinking, and he was smiling. Not a normal smile. A stretched, unnatural grin that showed too many teeth. My blood went cold. I gripped my knife tighter, my breath shallow. He didn't move. He just stood there, grinning at me. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, he turned and walked back into the trees. Not hurried, not sneaking, just walking. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I decided to leave. I packed up quickly, barely eating. The whole time, I felt exposed, like eyes were on me from the trees. The hike back was the longest I had ever done. Every few minutes, I stopped and listened. The forest was too quiet. Then, about halfway back, I found something. Footprints. Not mine. They were fresh, deep, and they were following mine. My hands started shaking. Picked up my pace, heart pounding. With every step, I felt him. Somewhere. Watching. I reached my truck just as the sun was setting. I threw my pack in the back and climbed inside, locking the doors. I sat there for a moment, breathing hard. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw him, standing at the edge of the trees, smiling. I started the engine and tore down the road, not looking back. I don't camp alone anymore, and I never go back to those woods. I like camping alone. I know most people don't understand it. They ask why I'd want to go deep into the woods with no one around, no cell service, no safety net. They say it's dangerous, that something could happen to me and no one would know. That's the appeal. I've been doing solo camping trips for years. I love the quiet, the isolation, the feeling of being completely disconnected from the world. Out there's no noise, no stress, just trees, fresh air, and time. But this trip was different. This time I wasn't alone. I had planned everything carefully, like always. I found a remote spot in a national forest, nowhere near any marked trails, far from the usual campsites. The hike was about 10 miles from where I parked my truck, deep enough that I wouldn't run into anyone. That was the goal. The first few miles were easy. The weather was perfect, cool, crisp air, the smell of damp earth and pine. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No distant hum of cars, no voices, just the occasional rustling of leaves and the sound of my boots on the dirt. After about 5 hours, I reached my chosen site, a small clearing near a stream. Perfect. Flat ground, plenty of space, and a water source nearby. I set up my tent, gathered firewood, and built a small fire as the sun started to set. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. She was standing at the edge of the tree line, maybe 50 yards away, just standing there. She was barefoot, wearing a long, pale dress that looked old, almost gray with dirt. Her hair was long and tangled, hanging in loose strands over her face. She wasn't moving. She wasn't even shifting her weight, just standing stiffly, like she was frozen. I felt something in my gut tighten. I didn't move, just watched her, waiting for her to do something. Then I blinked, and she was gone. I scanned the trees, my heart pounding. Nothing, just shadows and leaves shifting in the wind. I tried to shake it off. I was tired. The light was fading. Shadows could play tricks on the mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing things, small noises just outside my tent. twigs snapping, leaves rustling. At one point, I heard breathing, slow, steady breathing, right outside. I gripped my knife, my body rigid, waiting for something to happen. Minutes passed, then nothing. The breathing stopped. I stayed awake for hours, listening. By morning, I convinced myself it was my imagination. But when I stepped outside, I saw them. Footprints, not mine. They circled my tent, stopping just at the entrance. My stomach turned. I needed to leave. I packed up quickly, barely stopping to eat. Every few minutes, I stopped to listen, scanning the trees. I felt watched, exposed. Halfway back to my truck, I found something, a small wooden figure. It was hanging from a low branch, swaying gently, a rough carving of a woman. Something about it made my skin crawl. I moved faster. The last few miles were the longest of my life. Every few steps, I thought I heard something behind me, the crunch of leaves, the snap of a twig. I didn't look back. I reached my truck just as the sun dipped below the trees. I threw my pack in the back and climbed in, locking the doors. I sat there, breathing hard, trying to calm down. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw her, standing at the edge of the trees, closer this time, watching, still smiling. I turned the key, the engine roared to life, and I sped down the road, not stopping until I was miles away. I don't camp alone anymore, and I never go back to those woods. I don't scare easily. I've been camping alone for years. It's something I do to clear my mind, to step away from the chaos of life and be alone with my thoughts. Most people don't understand it. They tell me it's dangerous, that I could get lost, get attacked by an animal, or worse, run into the wrong kind of person. But I've never had an issue, until this trip, until I saw the dog. I had picked a remote spot, deep in a national forest. It wasn't on any official trail, which was perfect. I didn't want to see anyone, just miles of untouched wilderness. I had studied the maps, planned my route, and packed enough supplies for 4 days. The hike in was peaceful. The early fall air was crisp, the scent of damp earth and pine filling my lungs. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. That's what I loved about these trips, the silence. No cars, no buzzing phones, no voices. By late afternoon, I reached my chosen campsite, a small clearing near a slow-moving stream. I set up my tent, gathered firewood, and built a small fire as the sun started to set. That's when I first saw it. At the edge of the trees, just outside the fire's glow, stood a dog, a large, black dog. It was just standing there, staring at me. Its body was thin, almost too thin, ribs barely hidden beneath dark, matted fur. Its head was lowered slightly, ears perked, tail stiff. Something about it made me uneasy. Stray dogs aren't uncommon in the wilderness. People dump them out here sometimes, thinking they'll survive. Some do, most don't. But this dog, something was wrong with it. Its eyes, even from a distance, I could see them. Too pale, too reflective in the firelight. They didn't glow like an animal's eyes should in the dark. They were just empty. I tossed a piece of jerky toward it, thinking maybe it was just hungry. It didn't move, didn't sniff the air, didn't react at all. It just stood there, watching. I felt something in my gut tighten, a warning. I turned my back to the fire, trying to ignore it. If I showed no interest, maybe it would leave. But when I glanced back, it was gone. I scanned the tree line, heart pounding. The woods were silent, too silent. Not even the usual night sounds. No crickets, no rustling leaves. Nothing. Just stillness. I told myself it was fine. Just a stray dog passing through. But I barely slept that night. I woke at dawn, stiff and unrest. The fire had burned low, just a pile of glowing embers. I crawled out of my tent, stretched, and then I saw them. Paw prints, all around my campsite. Deep, heavy prints circling the tent, the fire, even my backpack. I hadn't heard a thing. A chill crept up my spine. The prints weren't normal. They were too big, too deep, and the way they moved, it wasn't random. It wasn't the pattern of a curious animal sniffing around. It was deliberate, methodical, like something had been pacing, watching. I packed up quickly. Something was wrong. I wasn't about to stay and find out what. The hike back felt different. The forest felt wrong. Every so often, I stopped and listened. I felt watched, exposed. Then, about an hour into my hike, I saw it again, far ahead, standing in the middle of the trail. The dog. It was facing me, perfectly still, waiting. My heart pounded. I gripped the straps of my backpack, forcing myself to breathe evenly. I took a step forward. It didn't move. Another step. Still nothing. Then, without a sound, it turned and walked into the trees. Not running, just walking, like it wanted me to follow. I didn't. I kept moving faster now. I wasn't running, but I was close to it. I kept checking over my shoulder, expecting to see it behind me. I never did, but I felt it. I knew it was there. The last few miles were a blur. I reached my truck just as the sun dipped below the horizon. I threw my pack in the back, climbed in, and locked the doors. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm down. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw it, standing at the edge of the trees, watching, still, waiting. I turned the key, the engine roared to life, and I sped down the road, not looking back. I don't camp alone anymore, and I never go back to those woods. I go camping alone. Most people don't get it. They tell me it's dangerous. They say I could get hurt, get lost, get attacked by some animal, or worse, run into the wrong kind of person. But I like the silence, the isolation. I do it to get away, to clear my head. No distractions, just nature. I've done this for years. Nothing bad has ever happened. Until now. I had picked a remote spot deep in a national forest, far from any trails, away from designated campsites. I spent weeks researching maps, making sure no one would be around. The hike was about 12 miles from where I parked my truck. By the time I reached my chosen spot, the sun was dipping lower in the sky. It was perfect. A small clearing surrounded by thick trees, a slow-moving stream nearby for water. I set up my tent, gathered some firewood, and got a fire going just as the sky darkened. Then I saw her. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. She was standing at the edge of the tree line, maybe 50 yards away. Still, too still. She was thin, her arms hanging limp at her sides. Her hair was long, dark, unkempt. She was barefoot, wearing a pale dress that looked old and tattered, almost blending into the dimming light. She wasn't moving, just watching. My stomach tightened. There shouldn't have been anyone out here. I had gone far beyond any marked trails, and she was alone. I stood there, frozen. My fire crackled, the only sound breaking the silence. Then, without a sound, she stepped back into the trees. Gone. I scanned the darkness, waiting for her to reappear. She didn't. I told myself it was fine, just some lost hiker. Maybe she had wandered too far from a trail. Maybe she lived nearby. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Something about her had been off. That night, I barely slept. The forest was too quiet. No crickets, no owls, just silence. I kept hearing noises outside my tent. Leaves crunching, twigs snapping. Someone was out there. At one point, I heard breathing. Slow, shallow, just beyond the thin nylon wall of my tent. I gripped my knife, my heart pounding. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Minutes passed. Then the breathing stopped. I lay awake until the sky turned gray with the first hint of dawn. When I finally stepped outside, I saw them. Footprints. Small, bare footprints in the dirt, circling my tent. My stomach dropped. They weren't there the night before. I packed up fast. I wasn't staying another night. As I hiked back, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every so often, I stopped and listened. The trees were still, the air heavy. Then, about 6 miles in, I saw something ahead. A shape, standing in the middle of the trail. The woman, closer now. Her head tilted slightly, her arms still hanging limp at her sides. I stopped. My chest tightened. She was blocking the path. I took a slow step forward. She didn't move. Another step. Still nothing. Then, without a sound, she turned and walked into the trees. Not running, just walking, like she wanted me to follow. I didn't. I moved fast. I kept checking over my shoulder, expecting to see her behind me. I never did, but I felt her, watching, waiting. The last few miles were a blur. I reached my truck just as the sun dipped below the horizon. I threw my pack in the back, climbed inside, and locked the doors. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to catch my breath. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw her, standing at the edge of the trees, watching, still, waiting. I turned the key, the engine roared to life, and I sped down the dirt road, not looking back. I don't camp alone anymore, and I never go back to those woods. I like to camp alone. Most people don't understand it. They say it's dangerous, that something could happen to me, and no one would be there to help. But that's exactly why I do it. I like the quiet, the isolation. No distractions. Just me and the wilderness. I've been doing solo trips for years. Nothing bad has ever happened. Until this one. I chose a remote spot, deep in a national forest. No trails, no campsites, just miles of untouched land. It was a place I had found on a map. A small clearing near a slow-moving river, far from anything. I packed enough supplies for 4 days. I had everything planned. The hike in was peaceful. The early fall air was crisp, the scent of damp earth and pine filling my lungs. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. That's what I loved about these trips. No cars, no people, no noise. After about 8 miles, I reached my spot. A perfect clearing, surrounded by thick trees. I set up my tent, gathered firewood, and built a small fire as the sun started to set. That's when I noticed it. Something was off. I couldn't explain it at first. It was just a feeling, like I wasn't alone, like something was watching me. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks on me. I had been alone in the woods plenty of times before, but as the sun dipped lower, the feeling got worse. And then I saw him. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. A figure standing at the edge of the tree line, far enough that I couldn't make out his face, but close enough that I knew he was looking at me. He was tall, thin, dressed in dark clothes. His posture was strange, stiff, unmoving. He just stood there, watching. My stomach tightened. There was no reason for anyone to be out here. I had hiked miles off trail. I stared at him, waiting for him to say something. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he was another camper. But he didn't speak. He didn't move. I turned away, pretending to ignore him. When I looked back, he was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. The woods were too quiet. No wind, no rustling leaves. Just silence. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, slow, circling my tent. I held my breath, gripping the knife I always kept beside me. The footsteps stopped. I waited. Minutes passed. Then nothing. I told myself it was an animal. A deer, maybe. But deep down, I knew better. In the morning, I found them. Footprints. Not mine. They circled my tent. I packed up fast. I wasn't staying another night. The hike back felt different. The forest felt wrong. Every few minutes, I stopped and listened. I kept feeling like someone was behind me. Then, about 4 miles in, I saw something ahead. A shape, standing in the middle of the trail. The man. Closer now. I froze. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching. My chest tightened. I stepped off the trail, moving quickly into the trees, keeping my eyes on him. I wasn't taking any chances. I hiked the rest of the way with my knife in my hand. By the time I reached my truck, the sun was setting. I threw my pack in the back, climbed inside, and locked the doors. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm down. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw him, standing at the edge of the trees, closer than before, still, watching. I turned the key, the engine roared to life, and I sped down the dirt road, not looking back. I don't camp alone anymore, and I never go back to those woods. Camp alone. Always have. It's not that I don't enjoy camping with other people, but there's something about being truly alone in the wilderness that I can't get anywhere else. No noise, no distractions, just me, my gear, and nature. Most people don't understand it. They tell me it's dangerous, that I could get hurt, or worse, run into the wrong kind of person. I've heard all the warnings, but I've been doing this for years, and nothing bad has ever happened. Until this trip, until I saw the man in the trees. I had picked a remote spot, deep in a national forest. It was about 10 miles off trail, far from any designated camping areas. I planned everything, mapped out my route, packed enough food and supplies for 4 days. The hike in was peaceful. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. That's what I loved about these trips, the silence. No cars, no people, no distractions. By late afternoon, I reached my chosen campsite, a small clearing near a slow-moving stream. I set up my tent, gathered firewood, and got a fire going as the sun dipped below the trees. That's when I noticed it, a shape far back in the woods, just at the edge of the firelight. A man, standing between the trees, still, watching. I stared, my stomach tightening. I hadn't seen a single person all day. There were no trails nearby, no signs of any other campers. He was just there, silent, motionless. My first thought was that maybe he was lost. Maybe he had wandered too far from a trail and saw my fire. But something about him felt wrong. Even from a distance, I could tell he was tall, thin. His clothes were dark, baggy. His posture was strange, rigid, almost unnatural. I stood up, hoping he would say something. He didn't. He didn't move. Then, without a sound, he stepped back into the trees and disappeared. I stood there for a long time, listening, waiting. The forest was silent, too silent. Eventually, I sat back down, staring into the fire, trying to shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks on me. But I kept the knife close when I crawled into my tent that night. I woke up to the sound of something moving outside my tent. I held my breath, listening, leaves crunching, slow, deliberate footsteps circling the tent. I reached for my knife. My heart was pounding. Then silence. I lay there, frozen, waiting for something to happen. Minutes passed, then an hour. When the sun finally started to rise, I forced myself to unzip the tent. The campsite looked normal. My fire pit was untouched, my gear still where I left it. But then I saw them. Footprints, not mine. They circled my tent. The tracks were deep, heavier than my own. The spacing was strange, too long, like whoever made them had taken slow, deliberate steps. I scanned the trees, my pulse hammering. Nothing, just the same quiet forest. I needed to leave. I packed up my gear as fast as I could, stuffing everything into my backpack with shaking hands. I hadn't planned to leave until tomorrow, but I wasn't staying another night. I started hiking back. The forest felt different now. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, oppressive. I kept checking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him standing on the trail behind me. I never did, but I could feel it. Something was watching me. The first few miles passed without incident, but the feeling never left. Every so often, I stopped and listened. The trees were still, the air thick with that unnatural silence. Then, about 5 miles in, I saw something ahead. A shape, standing in the middle of the trail. The man, closer now. His face was obscured by shadows, but his posture was the same, too still, too rigid. I stopped, gripping my knife. He didn't move, didn't speak. Then, slowly, he turned and walked into the trees. Not running, just walking, like he wanted me to follow. I didn't. I moved fast, almost jogging now, my breath coming in quick, sharp bursts. I kept checking over my shoulder. I never saw him again, but I could feel him, watching, waiting. The last few miles were a blur. I reached my truck just as the sun dipped below the horizon. I threw my pack in the back, climbed inside, and locked the doors. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm down. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw him, standing at the edge of the trees, still watching. I turned the key, the engine roared to life, and I sped down the dirt road, not looking back. I don't camp alone anymore, and I never go back to those woods. I've been camping my whole life. My dad took me and my brother out to the woods every summer growing up, teaching us how to fish, build fires, and find our way with a map and compass. I always felt comfortable in the wild, more at home there than in the city. That changed last year. I haven't camped since, and I don't think I ever will again. It was supposed to be a solo trip. I'd done plenty of them before, just me, my tent, and a few days of peace away from everything. This time, I wanted to go somewhere new. I spent weeks researching remote campgrounds and finally settled on a place deep in the mountains, hours from any town. It wasn't an official campsite, just a spot I found on a hiking forum. The guy who posted about it said he'd never seen another person there. That's exactly what I wanted. I packed everything I'd need: food, water, my knife, a hatchet, my rifle just in case. I wasn't worried. I'd camped in bear country before. I knew what I was doing. I drove out early in the morning, taking highways, then back roads, then dirt paths that got rougher the deeper I went. My truck handled it fine, but I started getting the feeling that I was really out there. No cell service, no signs, just endless trees. Eventually, the road ended. I parked, locked up, and started hiking. The first few miles were easy. The air was crisp, the forest quiet except for the sounds of birds and the occasional squirrel darting through the underbrush. I followed an old game trail, barely visible beneath the fallen leaves. It was steep in places, but I liked the challenge. I felt good. After about 4 hours, I found the perfect spot. A small clearing next to a stream, flat enough for my tent. No sign that anyone had camped there before. I set up my tent, gathered firewood, and started a fire before the sun got too low. That first night, everything was fine. I cooked some food, sat by the fire, and listened to the sounds of the forest. When I finally crawled into my sleeping bag, I fell asleep fast. I woke up in the middle of the night. At first, I didn't know why. Then I realized how quiet it was. Too quiet. The usual sounds, crickets, owls, the wind through the trees were gone. Just complete, heavy silence. Then I heard something, a soft rustling, like leaves being disturbed. It wasn't the wind. It was slow and deliberate. I lay still, heart pounding, listening. It sounded like footsteps, but not close, just far enough away that I couldn't be sure. I reached for my rifle, keeping my breathing as quiet as possible. The sound stopped. The silence stretched on. My eyes stayed locked on the tent's thin fabric, expecting a shadow to pass at any moment. But nothing happened. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep again, because the next thing I knew, it was morning. I stepped outside, scanning the trees. Nothing looked out of place. Maybe it had been an animal, a deer. That made sense. Still, I felt uneasy. I checked my surroundings, making sure nothing had been disturbed. My food was untouched. No tracks, no signs of anything coming into my camp. Trying to shake it off, I spent the day hiking, following the stream deeper into the mountains. The landscape was rugged, steep inclines, thick underbrush, no trails. I saw some animal tracks, mostly deer and raccoons, nothing unusual. By the time I got back to camp, the sun was low. I built up my fire, cooked dinner, and tried to enjoy the solitude. But that feeling lingered. I kept my rifle next to me as I sat by the fire. That night, I woke up again. This time, I knew what had woken me. Footsteps, closer than before. I held my breath, gripping my rifle. The steps were slow, deliberate, moving just outside my tent. Then they stopped. I couldn't see anything, but I felt it. Someone, something, was standing there. Minutes passed. My whole body was tense, every muscle ready to react. But nothing happened. No movement, no sounds. Finally, I forced myself to move. Slowly, carefully, I reached for the zipper of my tent, opening it just an inch. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a faint glow. I scanned the trees. Nothing. But then I saw it. A single footprint. Human. Just a few feet from my tent. I stayed awake the rest of the night, rifle in my lap, eyes locked on the trees. The first light, I packed up. I wasn't going to stay another night. I should have left the moment I found that footprint. But I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just scaring myself. Instead of heading straight back to my truck, I decided to hike to a nearby ridge first. It was about an hour away and would give me a good vantage point to get my bearings. Halfway there, I noticed something strange. The forest felt different, like I was being watched. Every time I stopped, the silence pressed in, like it was waiting. Then I saw it. A tree, deep in the woods, stripped of its bark. Long, deep claw marks ran down its surface. Not from a bear. They were too precise, too deliberate. And next to it, something worse. A deer, or what was left of one. His body was torn open, ribs exposed. But there was no blood, like it had been drained. I turned and walked as fast as I could without running. When I finally reached my truck, I felt a wave of relief. I threw my gear in the back, got in, and locked the doors. Then I noticed something. My tire was slashed. A deep, jagged cut. Not a puncture from a rock. A slice. Panic surged through me. Someone had been here. Someone had done this. I still had a spare. I forced myself to move, working as fast as I could, constantly glancing at the trees. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the jack. As I tightened the last lug nut, I heard it. A branch snapping. Close. I didn't look. I didn't breathe. I just grabbed my rifle, threw open the truck door, and floored it. My tires skidded on the dirt, kicking up dust as I sped down that narrow road, barely keeping control. The trees blurred past, my heart hammering. I didn't stop, didn't slow down, not until I was back on paved road, miles away. Only then did I pull over, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I never went to the police. What would I say? That I heard footsteps in the night? That I found a footprint? That something or someone slashed my tire in the middle of nowhere? They wouldn't believe me, but I know what I heard, what I saw. I haven't camped since. I don't go near the woods anymore, because something was out there that night, and it wasn't alone.